What's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday out there. Gerald here with your weather forecast, and we've got a lot to talk about today with that forecast, including now Major Hurricane Lee continuing to churn away over the open Atlantic water. So again, a lot of this video going to be dedicated to where Lee is going and who he could impact potentially directly and in a very big way going into next week. Now, I'll let you know ahead of time, there's a lot of details to continue to kind of iron out in this forecast, and a lot is going to change between now and then, as we are very familiar with in the world of weather. Predicting, things like this 7 to 10 days out is a very tough thing to do. So again, letting you know ahead of time, nothing is set in stone. And kind of building off of that, I'm going to go on a bit of a soapbox here. So if you would like to skip it, definitely down in the timeline, we have numbers on where exactly I talk about what in the video. So definitely skip ahead if you don't want to listen to the rest of this intro. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about something here. So something we see a lot this time of year, and we're seeing plenty of this year as well, unfortunately, is a lot of misinformation kind of getting floated around on social media. We see it a lot in the wintertime as well with winter storms, but this time of the year, I think it's a little more important to kind of call that out. And unfortunately, specifically on some platforms like TikTok, you may see a lot of things where people are talking about, oh, the GFS model shows 300 hours from now, we're going to have a major hurricane landfalling in the Outer Banks. Well, I just watched one of those videos a couple days ago, and now here we are, and the Outer Banks really have about a 0% chance, in all honesty, of seeing a direct landfall. So these people a lot of the times like to cover their tracks with, oh, I didn't say this was going to happen, it was just a possibility. Well, unfortunately, these same people are in this business just for the money. So I'm going to go ahead and let you know ahead of time, I'm definitely here to help you out. My goal is to continue to help protect you, help protect your property, as is often the goal with many people who actually care about meteorology. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be spending tens of thousands of dollars to get this degree if it wasn't for the fact that I care about helping you directly. And I can guarantee I'm not in this for the money, because if I was, I would have done something very different with my life. So I just want to throw that here at the beginning of the video. Really be careful where you're getting your information from. Obviously, the best place to get it from are degreed meteorologists. Luckily for me, I'm surrounded by them on a daily basis on campus, and I've learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn a lot, and I try to go ahead and share that knowledge with you on this channel. And also, this is really just great practice for my future. So just a little bit about me there. Again, though, just be careful where you're getting your information from, because misinformation, unfortunately, is very widespread this time of the year. And unfortunately, the weather is one of those things that everyone cares about. So it's very easy to get those clicks and very easy to make a quick buck if that's your goal with meteorology. So again, done with the soapbox now. We can go ahead and jump into the forecast now, as I don't want to take up all of your Thursday here, and I'm sure you're probably tired of hearing me ramble on. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into that forecast. So taking a look at what we're seeing out there right now. Again, a pretty pronounced trough. This is leading to some showers and storms throughout the east today. In fact, some very strong storms as well. You'll notice as the sun is setting here on the east coast, down here into South Carolina, we've had some insane storms this afternoon. Anyone watching down near Columbia, South Carolina, kind of down near Lake Murray, we had a life-threatening severe thunderstorm warning issued for winds getting up towards 80 miles an hour with those gusts. So that's well into Category 1 hurricane strength, with thunderstorms rolling on through the Columbia metro. And we've even seen some of those storms kind of work their way up towards Charlotte and even back up towards sections of kind of the Richmond area of Virginia. So again, seeing widespread storms, and those even spreading up into the northeast. Now, as we go through the next couple of days, unfortunately, we're going to get a piece of energy to kind of break off of this trough and kind of just hang around the southeast for the next couple of days, continuing to lead to some strong storm development. And that, unfortunately, again, will last well into this weekend. Now, as for radar imagery right now, we do actually have a severe thunderstorm watch up here in the northeast from kind of the Albany area all the way back down towards Philly, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, also in on that severe thunderstorm watch for a pretty impressive line of storms, quite frankly, moving on through sections of Pennsylvania, kind of near the Scranton area, and moving into sections of New York State. Again, so definitely make sure you have a way to get those warnings should those storms continue to stay severe. Now, areas further south into the Carolinas is actually where we've seen most of the severe weather so far today, even though we don't have a watch currently. Again, folks in Columbia getting absolutely blasted by storms this evening. We had some stronger storms up in the upstate this afternoon into Caesars Head, Table Rock area, and even back towards Gaffney, seeing some of those stronger storms. As we go through the evening, expect these to continue to generally work off to the north or the east as they kind of just spin around this leftover piece of energy back towards Tennessee. So again, expecting those showers to continue into the overnight hours, but generally, kind of dying off as we go through the evening hours. And again, even some of those storms all the way back towards Texas as well. All right, so I did have a mention in the comments to move my face a little bit here, and I picked the wrong thing there. I'm going to move my picture over here just so we can see Texas as well. I do apologize. Again, I had a comment about that. I was covering the entire state of Texas. I didn't realize that, so go ahead and move myself out of the way here so you can see that a little bit better. So taking a look at the next couple of days with our NAM model, again, expecting these storms to continue throughout the evening hours, eventually dying out as we get into the overnight hours. But as we go into tomorrow afternoon, as this trough continues to kind of hang around, expect more showers and storms to begin to form, again, up into the northeast, very possible, also down into the southeast as well. So really more of the same places that we saw today, once again seeing those storms tomorrow evening and into the early overnight hours before once again dying down, going into the overnight Friday and into our early Saturday. Now, as for our Saturday, I think Saturday probably could be quite a rainy day in the southeast as this low gets a bit of a boost from some Atlantic moisture and Gulf moisture just due to the placement of it. It's going to really be able to tap into that. And we could again see some very widespread storms on Saturday afternoon and evening. So if you have any plans this weekend, definitely be wary and have a way to maybe bring those inside through the mid-Atlantic and southeast. And again, those storms once again could continue into the overnight hours of Saturday. So definitely watching out for that. Now, as for dew points and how muggy it's going to feel, I didn't quite add this on the map, but let me back this up a little. So again, it's going to be relatively nice here through the Midwest and into the Ohio River Valley. It's those of us east of the Appalachian chain, unfortunately, that are going to really be holding on to that muggier weather, especially in the southeast where we have a bit more of some help from that low pressure, really bringing in that moisture from the Gulf and the Atlantic. So just going to have to watch that as we go into this weekend. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and again move my picture back over to the other side now that we're done with that map, and hopefully that works. So we'll definitely see here by the time I'm done recording this if that worked. Anyway, though, back to the weather map here. So again, the reason we're going to see this is all due to this kind of piece of low pressure, or this kind of kink you see in the map here. This is a bit of energy that is broken off from the overall trough, and that's going to just kind of hang around the southeast for the next couple of days, helping to fuel more showers and storms through this weekend. Now, as we go into early next week, that will likely begin to weaken, and the rain chances should subside by the time we get into our Monday. Things will begin to improve, but as that happens, we're going to get a stronger storm system and a stronger trough to begin to develop back towards the Chicago area, and this is going to be oh so important in what happens with Hurricane Lee here in the future. Now, what we do know right now is it is very likely we're once again going to see rounds of showers and storms during the middle of next week in the East Coast, and likely drier air behind that. That I feel confident in. What we're going to have to wrinkle out, though, is how exactly this ties into Hurricane Lee and what exactly it does with this hurricane. Does it pull it north, potentially into the northeast and maybe Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, or does it kind of help push it out to sea? That is going to be the big question as we move into next week. So definitely watching that. Now, again, the one thing I do feel confident in is, of course, we're going to see rain this weekend. That should subside a bit going into early next week. So I think Monday looks relatively nice for most folks. Maybe some leftover rain in the Northeast and back into the Midwest. But as we get into the middle of next week is when that next storm system really works its way into the eastern half of the country. So I think Wednesday could be a rainy day for a lot of folks in the East Coast, maybe even Thursday as well. But behind that is when that drier, nicer air settles in. So I think next Friday, next weekend could be quite nice for the Ohio River Valley, potentially even the southern half of the country as a whole could see a bit of relief from that summertime heat and humidity. The real question mark will be for our friends up in the Northeast into next week. Again, what happens with Hurricane Lee here? Does he get pulled northward into that trough? Do they kind of absorb into each other or kind of mesh into one? Or does this trough just kind of push Lee back out to sea? Again, we'll look at some different solutions here in a bit on what could potentially happen there. Again, though, the good news, drier air on the way. So going into this weekend, again, unfortunately, still pretty muggy for us in the southeast and east coast. And that could last into early next week before that trough swings on through. A nice cold front. And then by the time we get into next Friday and into next weekend, much drier dew points down into the 40s and 50s. And that will bring fall-like air in for a lot of us. So again, a lot of us have that to look forward to no matter what really happens with Lee here. All right, so that's what we're going to see in the lower 48 throughout about the next week or so. Now let's take a look at the tropics, where things are quite interesting and we have a lot ongoing here and a lot to discuss. So right now, again, this is Hurricane Lee, has gone through very impressive, in fact, likely maybe some record-breaking rapid intensification this afternoon, already up to Category 4. Yesterday, this thing was a tropical storm. So over the past 24 hours, we have gone from 0 to 100 very quickly with Tropical Storm Lee here. Now behind that we have Tropical Storm Margot, I believe is how we're pronouncing this one. Good news with this one is that it is likely to kind of curve back out into sea and could potentially impact maybe the Azores Islands up there, or potentially even Europe in the long run. But as for us in the United States and Canada, we look pretty safe from that one. So we'll quickly take a look at the map as a whole. Again, Lee ongoing here in the Atlantic, also Margot behind that. Those are the two big story makers. All right, so kind of zooming in here on Tropical Storm Margot. Again, right now, just a tropical storm, likely to become a hurricane, but again, luckily, over the next week or so, likely just to kind of meander out here over the Atlantic and eventually should curve back towards Europe. So again, could potentially cause some problems there in the long run, but over the next 7 to 10 days, no problems with this storm. So we'll kind of brush that one off to the side. Now, this one is a bit of a different story. Hurricane Lee here, again, just about textbook imagery here on satellite. Very impressive, very cold colors showing up here on infrared. And what that tells me is that these clouds are getting very tall, hitting the top of the troposphere. Of course, as you may know, temperature decreases with height. So as these clouds get up there, we're getting those temperature readings from the top of the troposphere. And again, a very cold cloud top suggesting very strong storms. Another thing we're seeing that is very impressive, as you may notice, look at this lightning rotating around the eye of Lee here. That tells us that this storm is still rapidly intensifying, and this is one of those things that a lot of research has been done on recently and suggests that whenever we see these flare-ups of lightning in the eye walls of these hurricanes, again suggesting a very strong intensification and likely still ongoing intensification at a rapid pace. So again, very textbook imagery here. This likely now to become a Category 5 storm. So that would be the first of the year. And Category 5 storms are not something to just look at and say, well, there it is. This is going to be quite impressive to see. And it's going to be in a part of the Atlantic that we don't really see storms that often get to that magnitude. Recently, whenever we've seen these rapidly intensifying hurricanes, it's been out into the Gulf. This year, and right now, a little bit different with Lee here, as this is going to be kind of out in no man's land a little bit, holding on to major hurricane status from now through the foreseeable future, likely into at least the middle of next week, maybe even longer than that, as conditions are just ripe for a very strong hurricane out here in the Atlantic. So again, this is the latest cone from the National Hurricane Center. Of course, the best place to get your information on hurricanes and where they're going. As we go into this weekend, again, likely staying pretty well to the north and east of the Leeward Islands, and by the time we get into early next week, relatively north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola there, before likely beginning then to turn northward as we go into the middle of next week. So with that said, let's go ahead and look at some spaghetti here on our map. So these are our GEFS ensemble members. These are all the little pieces of the GFS model that I'm sure you hear plenty about on social media, brought together to form the actual model. So we kind of put all these together, and we also get a deterministic run. That deterministic run is what you often see on social media when people are saying, oh, massive hurricane gonna hit wherever. That's unfortunately likely what they're shoving down your throat is that. This, however, is a much more sensible way to go about forecasting hurricane tracks. So our ensemble members go anywhere from Cape Cod to well out into the middle of the Atlantic right now. Now, luckily, the cluster here is a bit tighter than that, with most of them, again, keeping this off of the United States coastline. However, a different story for our friends up into Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, where they could be dealing with quite a strong hurricane potentially by the time we get into later next week, at least with our GFS ensemble members. So again, those same people that we're talking about, maybe a hurricane hitting the Outer Banks next week, you'll notice not a single member of our GEFS show that happening. So again, you got to be very careful of where you're getting your information. Now, our ECMWF ensemble members, or our Euro model ensemble members, paint a different story, and this one is a bit more concerning for us folks here into the Northeast and into New England. This paints potentially quite a strong hurricane directly impacting anywhere from Massachusetts up towards Nova Scotia. So Again, our Euro ensemble members have a very healthy cluster here that bring this thing, again, anywhere from New England into Nova Scotia. And unfortunately, this storm, as it gets closer, will likely only begin to get larger. So should we get a solution like this, we could have very consequential impacts into New England next weekend. Again, nothing is set in stone right now, but anytime you see a model like the Euro and its ensemble members have such a healthy chunk of members getting that close to the United States, specifically a part of the country that isn't very accustomed to hurricanes, you have to be careful and you have to really watch it, as this could be quite the storm to monitor. So again, what we feel confident in right now is as this kind of gets closer and a bit north of Hispaniola, it will likely make a turn north. The big question mark is, does it continue riding north up into New England and into Nova Scotia, or does it move north and then curve back out to sea? And I'll kind of explain to you why we have different solutions here. So we'll start with our GFS model. Again, this is the more optimistic one, the one that kind of keeps us a bit further out to sea, maybe impacting Newfoundland. And let's take a look at our wind map here at 500 millibars, or basically what that means is halfway in terms of where we are at in the atmosphere in terms of mass. So where we have all the air particles, obviously the most pressure is at the surface where we have most of the gravity pulling those down. As you get higher up in the atmosphere, less and less pressure. Same reason your ears pop whenever you're going up the mountain. So this is again about halfway up into the atmosphere. So you'll notice by the time we go into the middle of next week, this is Hurricane Lee, this big area of kind of wind, or this really pretty circle on your map, if you will. What we have going on, though, at the same time is that trough I was talking about over the Great Lakes, helping to bring some rain and storms into the East Coast. That's one piece of energy, two pieces of energy. The third piece is this much stronger trough back towards Canada. As I move this ahead into time, you'll notice on the GFS model, our trough in the Great Lakes kind of gets absorbed into that larger trough over Canada, and as that trough in Canada moves closer to the United States, it kicks Lee back out to sea. Those two kind of, don't interact very much and don't really congeal, if you will. They move separately, and the bigger trough just pushes Lee out to sea and helps kind of, keep it out from direct harm. And you'll notice eventually kind of curves it back up into Newfoundland as they then finally begin to merge. That's really going to be key, is when do these two pieces of energy merge into one? On the GFS here, it's quite later. It's not until the storm gets up to a latitude, a bit closer up towards Canada. The Euro model, a bit different. You'll notice as we move this ahead into time, again, all the same pieces of energy, but where they kind of begin to congeal or mesh is at a latitude more like North Carolina, Virginia, and that allows Lee to just have more of a further north track, maybe even curving back inland into the United States a little. So that is something we'll have to watch. Again, here on the Euro model, you'll notice these two pieces of energy that I have circled for you here really begin to work into tandem a lot sooner than on our GFS model, and therefore bring direct impacts into the Northeast and potentially even into southeastern Canada. So again, I'll tell you ahead of time, we're going to have a lot of time for weather balloons, reconnaissance to go out into the upper parts of our atmosphere, kind of analyze all these pieces, put them together, and kind of try to solve this puzzle as we get a bit closer. But again, this is still 7 to 10 days out, and just to give you some reference here, there's plenty of times in the winter we see a winter storm in the southeast 7 to 10 days out, and then come 7 to 10 days later we have a whole lot of nothing. So the weather is very tough to forecast this far out, especially with complex systems like we're seeing here. So plenty of time to forecast this, plenty of time to keep you updated, and really just make sure you're being careful on where you're getting your information from. And of course, right here is one great place to do it, is I'll keep you updated with kind of logical, sound reasoning here, and maybe not so much of the hype. Now with that said, again, I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday out there. Get out there and enjoy it. Maybe watch some Thursday night football, and I hope you have a wonderful start to your Friday tomorrow. Until next time, again, have a great one, and I will see you all then.